Shalom, dear friends. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yair Lutstein, and I currently serve as chair of the IMPJ. I've been asked to open this session titled A Decade of Dynamic Growth, the story of the IMPJ's new congregations, young rabbis, and growing influence on Israeli society. The last 10 years have seen phenomenal growth in our movement here in Israel. In 2009, we had 23 kihilot, congregations around the country. That year, our board strategically set a goal of doubling that number within a decade, and we met that target and more. Today, we have over 50 kihilot from Rosh Pina and Nahariya in the Galilee to Yahel and Lotan in the Arava. Some of those communities are large or mid-sized by Israeli standards, mostly independent. Kihilot such as Beit Daniel, Rabbi Azari's flagship congregation in Tel Aviv, Kol Shema in Harel in Jerusalem, Yozma in Modi'in, and the like. Others are smaller, younger communities, many still relying heavily on IMPJ funding, amongst them a sui generis model of communities serving an outlying regional council areas. And almost all of these varied kehilot are served by rabbis trained at HUC's Israeli Rabbinic Training Program, with Maram, our equivalent of the CCAR, now having more than 120 multi-generational rabbis as its members. You'll have the opportunity to hear from Rabbi Ayala Ronen Samuels, who heads Maram, while also serving as rabbi of our community in Caesarea and its adjacent regional council. In 2019, my predecessor at the IMPJ, as IMPJ chair, my friend and mentor, Reuven Marco, led a very important process within the IMPJ's board to determine a 5-year strategic plan for our movement. As part of that process, our board set several multi-year tasks for our movement, 2 of which were: 1, strengthening our existing kihilot by increasing the number of congregants and creating novel models of membership, and also concentrating on adding new synagogue buildings and infrastructure. And 2, limiting the number of new congregation we'll establish till 2025, concentrating on creating kihilot in towns and cities with particular demographic and strategic potential. That was the partial backdrop with which the current IMPJ board began its term in September of 2019. But starting in March of this year, the global pandemic threw a considerable wrench into the works. Aside from the economic implications of COVID-19, and they were and continue to be considerable, our movement and kihilot, like communities and congregations around the Reform world, have reacted resourcefully, creating impressive virtual presences for themselves and for our movement. That said, during this pandemic, our Israeli reform movement has witnessed what I believe is a uniquely Israeli reform phenomenon. I'd like to describe it as a form of a triangle. Teamwork between our kihilot, rabbis and lay leaders in different communities, sharing texts and ideas and often running services and programs together. One very recent example, one of many, a wonderful virtual collaboration between our communities and rabbis in Beersheba in the Negev, Tzur Hadassah just south of Jerusalem, and Carmiel in the Galilee, holding a service together for their 3 communities. These types of initiatives have been wonderful and remarkable. And to add to the mix, the work of our movement's online content department, which has created fabulous materials for our communities to use online. Moreover, during the pandemic, we have held movement-wide online activities simultaneously, including kehilot around the country. Just this past Motzei Shabbat, last Saturday night, we held a moving virtual second Hakafot ceremony, with each of the 7 Hakafot being held in different communities around the country. It brought our movement and its members together in a wonderful way. So what's the vision? We have dynamic, creative congregations and rabbis, and our movement is no less dynamic and creative. We might have to rethink some of the strategic plan I mentioned earlier, but of one thing I'm certain. Come 2025, we will be a bigger, stronger movement than we are today, and we and our wonderful kihilot will have an even larger influence on what's happening in Israeli society. Toda rabah, dear friends.
Erev Tov, Toda, Yair. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Kislansky, and I serve as the COO and Deputy Executive Director of the IMPJ, overseeing the congregational arm and education, both formal and informal. And I have the pleasure of hosting this panel and, of course, working with our wonderful board and the wonderful chair of the board, Yair Lutstein, who you just heard from. So thank you, Yair. And as Yair mentioned, we're here to talk about the growth and the people and the congregations and how we were able to really grow in the last 10 years. And to that end, we are going to hear three amazing people who are leading three of our congregations. Some of them are new in young congregations, and one congregation is pretty established. And I'd like to actually introduce our three speakers today. So first, I would like to introduce Rabbi Meir Azari. Rabbi Meir Azari is the head of the Daniel Centers in Tel Aviv, Yafo. Rabbi Azari serves as the senior rabbi of Bet Daniel congregation since its establishment 30 years ago. He's the former chairman of Maram, the Reform Rabbinical Council in Israel, former Director General of the IMPJ in the years 1986 through 1989. And during his tenure, were established the Israel Religious Action Center and both our departments of education and congregations. Rabbi Azari initiated the establishment of Ruth Daniel Hotel in Jaffa, which hosted tens of thousands of tourists in the days before COVID-19, especially birthright participants. Rabbi Azari has published 2 books on the development of Independence Day holiday and a book of articles on the Reform movement. His wife, Anna, is the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and former Israeli ambassador to Ukraine, Russia, and Poland. So we will hear from Meir. We will hear from a wonderful lay leader, a young lay leader. Her name is Adi Efraimi-Cohen. Adi is currently serving as a member of the board of directors of Congregation Yuval in Gedera. Adi founded the young congregation 12 years ago together with Hilah and served as the community's chairperson from the day it was founded until a year ago. Adi is a high school educator and a Bible and Talmud teacher. After her military service, Adi went on short missions around the world, worked with teenagers and young adults, and thus got to know Netzer and Nifty movements, and through this work, the Reform movement. Adi is married and the mother of 4. And the last person I would like to introduce is Rabbi Dr. Ayala Ronen Samuels. Ayala is the founding rabbi of Congregation Tfilat Ha'adam in Caesarea and a rabbi in the Carmel Coast Regional Council. Rabbi Ayala also serves as the chairperson of Maram, the Reform Rabbinical Council in Israel. She was born in Kibbutz Shamir on the slopes of the Golan Heights. Rabbi Ayala received her PhD in Jewish education from JTS in New York and was ordained at the Israeli Rabbinical Training Program at HUC Jerusalem. So through the personal perspective of these 3 inspiring leaders, we will get a closer look at the stories of our congregations and their own vision. And one question I have for each of you, for the 3 of you, is this. if each of you would just start by describing in several words your congregation and its activities and how you choose to make progressive Judaism accessible in the geographical area in which you operate. So, Adi, if you can go first, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. So good evening, Erev Tov, everyone. I feel very privileged to be here tonight, and I'm really exciting. And forgive me for my English. I didn't practice my English for a long time, so I hope that everything will be okay. Before everything, I will tell you a short story about myself. The first time that I met the Reform movement was 20 years ago, when I was 20 years. I went to a summer camp. I saw now Josh Weinberg, let's say hello. It was a Green Family Camp in Texas. And for the first time in my life, I felt that I belonged to Judaism, that I part of this big family of Jewish world. And since that moment, I promised to myself two promises. The first one was that I will raise my kids as a part of the reform movement according to the values of the reform movement. And the second thing was that I'm going to educate young kids to know that they part of the chain of Judaism, that even if they're not Orthodox, even if they secular or reform or conservative, they are part of this chain. And this is exactly what I'm doing today. First of all, I'm teaching high school kids, kibbutznik. They definitely not Orthodox or religious. And I'm teaching Bible, Tanakh, and Talmud. And they really feel that they're part of the chain. They're angry, they like it, sometimes they don't like it, but they have the knowledge. And it was one of my purpose. And second of all, I established a community in Gedera 12 years ago with Ayala. And I have 4 kids now that consider themselves as Reform Jews. So at least to those 2 goals, I can say that I succeed. And now I will tell you about this community, this Khilat Yuval. Yuval, it's initial of Judaism and tradition through the heart. And this is actually represent our Kila, our community. We are a young community. Most of the people have no connection to the Reform movement. They didn't know about the Reform movement until they met us. They came because they want a community and because they want liberal education, liberal Jewish education for the kids. And this is what what are we giving them? We every pair, for example, we adding Israeli song and Israeli poem. We're doing a lot of trips and treks in Israel because we believe that the way that we need to study the Torah, the Bible, is through our feet, and we can walk through history. We have a lot of tikkun olam and a lot of gemilut chasadim. We work with the community, not just with the Reform community, with all Gedera community. And later on, I will tell you about our project. Also, we have a lot of kids because we're a young community. We have a lot of families. So we have a lot of kids, and because of that, we have 2 different projects. One of them is the youth movement, Noel Telem, as you know, maybe as Nifty or Netzer. That what is very exciting, that our kids born into this reality. They born to the Reform reality. And since they were babies, they heard the songs and they know everything. Not like me. For them, this is what they knew since they born. A lot of them did a bar and bat mitzvah in our community. A lot of them went to a summer camp abroad, and here in Chavaya camp. And now they are a counselor in Noel Telem that actually it was Noor Telem used to be in our garden, and now at last they got a place. Another very big project that we have is the Stork Hasidot Yuval, Stork Yuval, and because we have a lot of babies, so we thought about the community. We thought what a woman who just have birth need, and she need help, especially with food. So now we have more than almost 300 babies that were part of this project. It means that we bring them homemade food, we help them, we can do babysitter, and it's amazing because not all those 300 babies and families part of the Reform community, but now they know that there is a Reform community in Gedera, and now they want to be related to. And the last thing that I want to say is cooperation with all kind of population in Gedera, and one of the biggest cooperation that we have is with the Ethiopian community. We celebrate together the Sigd, that it will be happened in a week, and Jerusalem Day, that Jerusalem Day is also the memorial day for the Ethiopian Jews who passed away on the way from Sudan to Israel. So it's really exciting to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. We're moving on to Ayala. And Ayala, can you describe your community and your work?
Yes, thank you, Anna. Adi, I'm inspired by your personal story and by the story of your community. Wow. And I'm also envious because I guess this is what happens when you start a community very young. Then the people you draw are young, and it's beautiful. I was born in and raised in a kibbutz in a very secular background. And I was lucky to marry into the Reform movement. And gradually it became part of my life and part of my worldview. And at the later stage, I became a rabbi. 10 years ago, people in Caesarea didn't know what Reform is. Most of the people that I see in my town and around my town, I am not only the first rabbi they meet, I'm the first Reform they meet. Most people were either secular, Israeli secular from all kinds of backgrounds and origins, or Orthodox, or what we call transparent kippah Orthodox, people that do not live an Orthodox way of life, but this is where their support go. This is what they expect when they say Jewish or Judaism. So it was a slow process. It was a journey. Starting, one of my leaders, lay leaders, told me the other day that we have the minyan model. We have minyans. Not always do all these minyans come together. There's the one that comes to services, and the minyan that goes to this chesed group, and this minyan that goes to that bet midrash. But it's the work is in circles that go from within outside. And I can't expect people to become members easily. It's usually a process of a few years, waltz of 2 steps in, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, like that. It's hard for people to identify with a religious community at least in our area. And it's hard to expect, and I do not expect membership fees, not right away. Yahir has mentioned that we have different membership models today. And I'm one that took that idea, and I have different membership models in my community as a way of drawing people inside from the outside. Our what do? We do we do all the Jewish holidays all year round, and they have become the staple of our congregation. And there are many people that will join only for the holidays, but they come and they see themselves as members because they come for the holidays. Most of our activities very Israeli in nature, in the sense that it's there is a lot of the general high Israeli culture inside. Poems, literature, Israeli lyrics, Israeli music. We do a lot of incorporating and inviting work. Let me tell you for just a short example. And for our Yom Kippur services, we always have people preparing readings, preparing singing, preparing kavanot. We have a few kavanot on every service. And I only ask the people to talk. I do not know what they will say, but it helps people bring themselves in. And so for others, it helps staying in. Because for many, the idea of being part of a service, of a religious service, is not easy. They need to overcome a barrier. So what do we do shortly? As a congregation and as a rabbi, we always choose derech eretz before almost everything else. We do not struggle. We do not fight. We always choose the way of making partners, making friends, looking for the way, a compromise, and it has gotten us to a very good place in our town. No time to elaborate on that. Flexibility, openness, listening. I am listening to my people to see what they want, because without them, I have no community. I think this is enough for my first minutes.
But this is so inspiring. Thank you, Ayala and Meir. Bevakasha.
Hi, thank you, Anna and Adi and Ayala. I learned a lot today about your communities, and I'm so happy and glad. So you mentioned earlier that my wife works for the foreign ministry, Anna, and first term in San Francisco took me after 3 years as the executive director of the Reform Movement of San Francisco. And I've learned through those 2 years a lot about our movement there in North America, but about, I think, the future and the options of Reform Judaism in Israel. And I've learned to think out of the box with the help of Professor Jerry Bubis and few rabbis that became my friends, like Rabbi Peter Rubinstein, that later served in Central Synagogue, but in that time was in San Francisco area. When I returned to Israel in 91, I decided with the board of Beit Daniel that hired me that we are not going to do more of the same. We are not going to open a Reform shtibel in Tel Aviv, an American Reform shtibel in Tel Aviv, or South African or English shtibel in Tel Aviv. And that was a major issue. I think that was the beginning of the change. I remember the debate that I had with my board in the early days. I almost quit my job after a month being there. When they demand that I will give the sermon, the Dvar Torah, not just in Hebrew, but in English as well. And we had a huge debate. English, yes or no? And the answer was no. We are going to build an Israeli community. And the second step is not just an Israeli community that speaks Hebrew, and emphasize the fact that we are speaking Hebrew. The second decision was that we are going to build a synagogue that is not based on membership. That was the concept. The concept usually in North America, in England and South Africa and all of the Reform world, we decided that we are going to do something else, to influence a city. we understood that there are more than 1 million Jews entering every day to work in Tel Aviv, and they live their life is very similar to the life of American average Reform or conservative Jew in North America. So how can we touch them? The question is not how many members we have. The question became, in our understanding, how many souls we touch, how many people we influence. Just few numbers. There are 220 bar mitzvot every year done at Beit Daniel before COVID. We have now a challenge. There are about 200 converts that are converted to Beit Daniel School of Conversion. Take the numbers and compare them to what happens in North America, in Reform conservative synagogues in England. We have, I do about 100 weddings a year, and we're doing that for about more than 25, 26 years. I did more than 2,000 weddings. The idea is to influence not just our community, the whole city. Beit Daniel became not just Beit Daniel. We are now Daniel Center for Progressive Judaism, 5 congregations under our umbrella. The concept is that we are going to work together. We're going to create a curriculum together, spirit, management, and we are going to influence the total community in Tel Aviv. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. We had to rebuild ourselves under the concept of self-income. And part of it was the idea to build our guest house in Jaffa. People thought that we were crazy. But the idea was to build another center in Jaffa that will help us to build another, another synagogue, community center. But the fact that we host until the COVID around 60,000 guests every year, about 30,000 of them birthright, gave us the ability to touch more and more people. At a certain point, we decided we are not touching just ourselves, but the community outside of Israel. And this is part of the story of Daniel Center for Progressive Judaism. When we do our activities, we try to touch as much as we can. We are having, for example, a program called Embracing Our Differences. I travel in North America. I saw a beautiful project in Florida in the city of Sarasota. We brought the project to Tel Aviv. 22 schools participate in this project, 20 schools in Tel Aviv region. We're talking about thousands of kids. Thousands of kids submitted the work. The work was presented in Jaffa Portis, the 6 years. 1 year it was presented in Dizengoff Center, the major, mall in Israel. You understand how many people see the results of the work that is done in a classroom run by Beit Daniel? The fact that the president of the state of Israel is visiting the exhibition, and right after that, this is what we need in Israel. This is the story of Beit Daniel. We don't look just for membership, but we look for the spirit and the knowledge that will be there. We are here in order to become an Israeli in movement.
Toda rabba. Thank you, Rabbi Meir. And we move to the next question. This question is specifically to you, Rabbi Ayala. Some of your work as a rabbi is in a regional rural community. You spoke about Caesarea, but you're also the rabbi of the Carmel Coast region. So this requires you to take into account that you work with a population that is different from the urban population. So could you please specify some of the characteristics of this population, and what would you describe as the main challenge you are facing when you are working in the rural area? So, bevakasha.
Thank you, Anna. I'm one of now, I think, 13 rabbis that are regional rabbis. And this is a new concept that the IMPJ has developed in the past less than a decade. And one of the advantages of that is that part of our salary, a good part of our salary, is paid for by the state, which is a huge achievement to Iraq, to the movement. But then it means creating a new form of Reform Judaism, a new concept. Many of my colleagues, about half of my colleagues in the regional reform, regional rabbinate, do not have a congregation. They do not have a synagogue. Well, many of us do not have a synagogue in liberal
A
congregations.
building, right?
What? A building. We do not have a building. Our building. We, by the way, have something, but not. But the idea is the rabbi is, in a way, a wandering rabbi, moving from one kibbutz to another moshav. My case is a little different. I'm not the only one who works like that, because I started with founding a congregation in my hometown. But still, I would say that at least a half of the people in my congregation are not from my town. For example, they cannot come from Yom Kippur, because you can't drive to the synagogue in Israel in Yom Kippur. So they can't come to services. They loved the Zoom services we did this year. But it's not the only thing. So one is that we have someone from this village and someone from that kibbutz and someone from a neighboring place. And my bar mitzvah families, not 200, I'm not there yet, Rabbi Meir. But if I have, this year I will probably have 13. They come from all over the area. They don't know each other usually. They don't go to the same school. It's more challenging to create a sense of community. But it's not only that, it's also that many of the towns and moshavim and kibbutzim,
mobile device.
I'm sorry.
Not mine.
No.
Many of the towns and the kibbutzim and moshavim have a very strong community-oriented characterism. And I will talk about it a little bit more later, but the needs are different, and the needs are more in the spiritual dimension and in people looking for something that will add an extra meaning to their life and connect them both to their Jewish roots and to something Israeli that is missing, that used to be a sense of belonging, a sense of worthy. And we're trying to add that and offer that to people.
Thank you, Ayala. The next question is to Rabbi Meir. You spoke about Beit Daniel. We know that it's the center of attraction for thousands of Israelis in the Tel Aviv area, and it's an established and thriving congregation. And at the same time, you've mentioned that under Beit Daniel, there are 5 congregations now under the Daniel Center. So this is not very obvious that you choose to look beyond Beit Daniel. You have established 2 young communities, the Daniel community in Jaffa, Khilat in the center of Tel Aviv. And in addition, in the past year, you took under your wing 2 more communities, Congregation Shirat Hagan in Ramat Gan, and which is a new Russian-speaking community of immigrants from the former Soviet Union, and Congregation Tiferet Shalom in Tel Aviv, which in Ramat Aviv, which until recently belonged to the conservative movement. So can you share a little bit the thoughts that you have and maybe the leadership of the congregation has behind these actions?
First, I think that the leadership of the conservative movement is still looking for me. They are very angry about the move that was done here. The synagogue decided that Beit Daniel concept, that the concept of Daniel Center is better to them, and they decided in a long process of about 2 years to move. It happened just recently during the COVID era, and it's quite a responsibility and a challenge to do that while COVID is outside. I will tell you why. We decided at a certain point that we are not dealing with just building a synagogue. We are building a movement. We are building a better Israel, a different Israel. And we had a huge debate years ago in our synagogue, in our community, before we launched the concept of Mishkenot Ruth Daniel, and we decided we're taking responsibility. Part of it is the fact that we built synagogues, but if you ask me, Anna, I think that the best story that grew up at Bet Daniel is the story of the young rabbi that grew up in our community. From Gilad Karif serving today as the executive director of the Reform Movement, to Talia Avnon leading today the Israeli program at the Hebrew Union College, to Adi Cohen serving a community in Australia, Sar Shaket serving a community of the World Union in South Africa, and I continue the list. There are 16 rabbis that grew up at Bet Daniel and serving today different communities. And most of the staff that is working today in the rabbinate level at Bet Daniel grew up in our community. We're very proud. This is part of the story. We're not building a community, we're building a movement. We are bringing a story to the Israeli society, the story of liberal, modern, and progressive Judaism. And I'm very proud that I understood that in the early days, that my success or our success as a community is not just about how many members Bet Daniel will have, is what is the legacy that will bring to the map of Israel. The fact that in almost every synagogue of our movement, there's somebody from Tel Aviv that grew up in Tel Aviv as a young person. For example, Gedera, Hila Visar, in Ilana Visar, leading the community with UAD, grew up at Bet Daniel, and we continue the list. Makes me very happy and proud. And I think that this is the story. You outside of Israel, helping us to build a movement here in Israel, and we, when we grew and we have the opportunity and the ability, we empower people. And I think that this is the challenge of a rabbi today in Israel, not just to do well to his community, but to bring to the story to so many other people. And I'm very proud. I think Bet Daniel is a great example for this phenomenon.
Thank you. So moving to Adi, so now we know that your partner in crime, Hila, also is a product of Bet Daniel. So Adi, we can see that you're very passionate and enthusiastic and very optimistic, but I want to point out the challenges as well. So in the recent years, it has not been easy for your community to conduct itself in the local politics in Gedera. And among other things, you are in a daily struggle, which is heroically maintained solely through volunteer leadership in an attempt to obtain a place from the council controlled by Orthodox elements. That's the city council of Gedera. So could you tell us a little bit about this struggle and share some insights?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Azari. I totally agree with you about the influence that you have for other community. We definitely look at Bet Daniel like the big father that one day we want to be. About ourselves, about the struggle. Until a year ago, I made a very, very long speech with a lot of details about the struggle that we have here in Gedera for asking for a land acceleration. But then I asked myself, is it important? Like, it's not interesting. You don't want to hear the details, what the mayor said and what we said, and that we went to court for at least 3 times, and what the judge said. It doesn't important. I think the main issue is for the last 11 years, we don't have an appropriate place to prayer. In the last 11 years, we are going every Shabbat to prayer in a school hallway. Very, very small place that it's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter. and we need to bring chairs from outside. And this is the reason that we don't have a Sefer Torah, because we can't live there, to leave it over there. And unfortunately, a lot of people actually left the community because of those conditions, because it's uncomfortable for them. And the bar mitzvot of the Khilat, that we have a lot of bar mitzvot, none of them can take place in Gedera, because no one will do a bar mitzvah in such a place. And every time that we ask from the mayor or from the people over there to get a land or something like this, they didn't answer us, or they gave all kind of excuse. And in the same time, the Orthodox community got synagogue, and they got a place. And the only reason that until now, for the last 11 years, we didn't get a place, we didn't get the land, is because that we reform, and because of discrimination. And I think this is the main issue. This is something that we need to deal, not the details, what they tell us and what we said. And sometimes it's make you want to leave everything and to give up and to say, it's too much. It's too much to deal with, because as Anna said, we just volunteering, and sometimes you feel like you're the enemy. And I can't believe sometimes that people, what people writing on the Facebook or all kind of chat, and what they thinking about us, and it's really frustrating. It's something that you need to deal with it every day. You need to wake up in the morning and to say, okay, today will be a better day. And what gives me the power is, first of all, the people in the community. And second of all, the Center of Action, and the Israeli Center of Action. Yeah.
Israeli Religious Action Center.
Yes, in Hebrew.
And you can mention their names.
Of course I will. Of course, they are my angels. They are totally my angels. Two amazing lawyers, and that they the light for our community. Orly Lachovsky-Erez and Miri Nachmias, that they're doing an amazing job. And they fight with us. And I know that it's a long battle. But we will win. And one very optimistic point of view that I have, that more than 500 people signed on a petition that said that they want, that in Gedera there will be a Reform synagogue. And it's mean a lot, because it's not a very big place, Gedera. And it's a lot of people in Gedera are secular, and maybe it's the moment to say that most of the people who are sitting in the council of Gedera, yes, they are religious, they are Orthodox religious, they are men. But every day we've been more and more optimistic. And I know when there is a light, the way to fight the light is to bring. There is darkness, sorry. The way to fight the darkness is to bring more light. So we're trying to be optimistic. It's not easy, but I hope that my son next year will be 13 years old, my oldest. I really hope that next year he will have the synagogue for his bar mitzvah. And if not him, I have 3 more kids. One of them have to do his bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah in Gedera. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adi. So I have another question for the 3 of you. I also want to mention to everybody around the world and in Israel who's watching, you can post some questions and not just comments if you want to ask a specific question to one of our panelists. So think about it while they answer my question. And the question is pretty obvious. It's about the corona pandemic and the challenge that it poses to the existence of our congregations. And I don't want to talk right now, and I'm sure there's a lot to say about the financial issues, but I want to talk specifically about the fact that we can't really get together and interact face to face. And it's harder to have experiences of ruach, social activities, and more when we can't get together in a physical manner. So I wanted to ask you, how do you address this challenge? And were you able to develop community resilience, and how are you keeping in touch with your members and making sure that you're still a congregation and a community at this time? If Meir, you could go first, and then Ayala and Adi, bevakasha.
Okay, the first challenge was to call to our people, make sure that they're healthy and safe, and we fixed a system that makes sure that we'll call to each member. And as you understood from my early comments, the membership is quite vague. There are members, but there are many people that participate different events and different clubs at Beit Daniel. I have in the synagogue a group that learn Bible every Sunday morning for the last 27, 28 years. It's about 50 people in the group, but most of them are not members of Beit Daniel. They're paying for the shiur, they're paying for the event, but we made sure to call to each one of them, a senior citizen, and we made sure that they're okay. We sent people to teach them how to operate the computer. I know the Zoom became the major issue, how you operate Zoom, how you meet the challenge of Facebook. While you're 70, 75, 80, you never use the computer. How you move your synagogue life to online. We did, I think, quite well. The numbers are talking. I mean, we had in Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, 14,000 viewers in Facebook. Now you can see that, the number. In Simchat Torah, we had between 3,000 to 4,000 in every service, 40 people in Zoom, and the rest of the people entering to Facebook. Every shiur is in Zoom. Many of them are in Facebook. We try to open and close according to the situation, but the main issue is dealing with people that life circle event were postponed because of the numbers that we deal with them at Beit Daniel. You understand that I had to talk to about 65, 70 bride and grooms, sometimes to postpone 2 or 3 times the wedding. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to talk to a woman that is ready for her wedding, and the third time the wedding is canceled or postponed. I had the bar mitzvah kids. You understand through the number that we had to postpone about 150 bar mitzvah events. We try to do them in different spots and homes through the Zooms. Just name it, we did it. It's a challenge. And yes, you said no economy and that issue, Anna, but we are holding a guest house in Jaffa, 60,000 guests that disappear in a second. What do you do with the people working there? People that are working for us for 10 years. How you deal with that? We have a school teachers that are paid by Beit Daniel through different grants, the education ministry, the city of Tel Aviv, and everything was cut. And how do you manage this group of workers that are working on behalf of Beit Daniel and behalf of the Reform movement? It's a challenge. We survive. We do better than we expected according to the numbers of people participating in our events. Our classes are full more than ever, but the economic challenge is enormous. You can't charge for a service. You can't charge for a shiur in online. It's a challenge. And the fact that we don't have today Mishkenot Ru Daniel as a base, as a base of income that we used to have, and the fact that our donors and supporters from around the world are having less today to give is a challenge. I want to emphasize the great work that the movement is doing. The board of the movement, Rabbi Gilad and Anna, I think that we are trying to not just to survive in Israel, we're trying to move to the next level. Make sure that during this time, those who missed us and never saw us and never understood what is Reform Judaism will have the opportunity to hear, to participate in events that we have. with the help of the movement and us created the short videos before Yom Kippur. Guys, there were 25,000 people that entered to those videos. You understand the size, the magnet of those events happening today in Israel? So this is the COVID story. It's a challenge, and I think this challenge will change the Israeli movement, will change the challenge of building reform, progressive Judaism in Israel, as you know from North America and Europe, in your community as well. So we'll have to talk more and more about the next level of Reform Judaism in the modern era. The COVID is just started. We have another 2-3 years to survive this epidemic. It's not the epidemic; it's the influence of the epidemic. It will take time until we will able to see 300 people or 400 people sitting in a wedding together, or in a classroom together, in a hall for a Friday night service as we used to. It's a challenge, but we'll survive and win, because we deserve to win. The Israelis needs us, and we have something to tell them. I'm so proud with the success that we had and the movement had during that era of COVID, since COVID started. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're nearing the end, but I want to hear also about your community, congregation Ayala, and your congregation Adi, and how you're dealing with the situation.
I don't have anything much more to say to add to what Rabbi Meir said. Meir, toda. I think you really touched on the most important issues, and on a smaller scale, whatever you said is true for every one of our congregations. If to add just one more thing that is beyond how, as a congregation here in Israel and everywhere abroad, we deal with the pandemic, I want to just point to the fact that we now deal with large despair. And as rabbis and congregations, there is a lot to do with that. And there's a big question of what is the role of the rabbi. Now, we're in a political upheaval time, and in a time of storms outside, and a time of seclusion and social distancing. And I'm sure a lot of it is true in everywhere in the world, in Buenos Aires and in New York and in Philadelphia. But the special flavor here is this sense of almost emergency, and the question of what is the role of rabbis in the time of such weakness and corruptness of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayala. Adi?
Yes, thank you. I will just, I want to relate to what Rabbi Ayala just said. For us, it's also not easy at all. And we feel in our community that the people had enough from the Zoom. They are really tired from it. So we ask ourselves what the biggest mission that we need to take of ourselves now in this condition. And we figure out that we need now to support the big community of Gedera, that we need to help people who had all kind of economic problem. And if we can support them, this is our mission now. And we took all the project that I told you before of the stroke, Yuval stroke, and now we're taking care of families who cannot cook from themselves, who need help with supply of food. And every day they get in warm meal, and this is the way that our community, our Khilat, getting together, not through prayers that we don't do a lot, I have to say now, but by doing tikkun olam, by helping. And what is a little bit ironic, but also give me a lot of hope, that the council of Gedera, they actually called me and they asked me if I can take this project on the community. Because they know that we will do it, and a lot of people will help them are Orthodox, and we didn't. We said, of course we will do it, because this is what Khilat need to do. This is our mission. So one hand is going to to court, and then the other end is cooking food. And I think we can live with it because this is what we believe in. From one hand, we want to do that, but we will never help to stop. So thank you.
So thank you. I'm very inspired. And Yair, we started this conversation with your words of wisdom and vision, and it will be great if you can wrap up the conversation.
So I want to just start by saying thank you to everyone who's joined us from around on virtually, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook, and it's wonderful to be part of this global family of Artseinu and the global reform world. I've come away inspired. I think that to hear the wonderful leaders that we have from the diverse types of communities that we have in Israel is just wonderful. To see the larger communities, to see the nascent, the smaller communities, and to see the work that's being done in the field. I think anyone who's listened to your stories can come away inspired. We face challenges, we face battles, we face the challenges today of COVID, but it's not only COVID. It's the fact that we are not always wanted within the communities that we find ourselves, and yet I come away always with a story that Meir, I think I've heard more than once tell. There's a story about many Israelis saying that the synagogue they don't go to is the Orthodox synagogue, and today we often hear in Tel Aviv that the synagogue that they do go to, and some of them don't go to, is Meir's Bet Daniel. And I think that is a real inroads that we're making within Israeli society, and that we continue to make into Israeli society. The challenges are financial, the challenges are political, the challenges are also fighting for our buildings, and we've had successes in the last few months for different communities around the country, and we will continue to have successes. And I am certain that we will go from strength to strength with the support of our friends around the world, but with the dynamic and strong leaders that we have within our movement. It's a pleasure to work with you, and it's an opportunity to thank each one of you, to thank Anna. Thank you for hosting this, for facilitating. Thank you to Ayala, Rabbi Ayala. Thank you to Adi, Rabbi Meir. It's always a pleasure to have you in any forum that we can have. And again, thank you to everyone who's joined us. Laila Tov mi Yerushalayim. I'm speaking from Jerusalem. And Laila Tov to all of you. Good day, good morning, wherever you might be. Toda rabba.
Laila Tov, and
Shalom.
don't forget to register directly in Zoom for tomorrow's Zionist Bet Midrash. Again, Laila Tov, and everybody, thank you very much.
Toda, Laila Tov, good night.
Good night. Tov.